All right. Good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone's doing all right. My name's Andre. I'm with ThreatLocker. I'm a account executive here. Been working with ThreatLocker for a while and happy to connect with everyone. I appreciate everyone making some time to get to know the platform a little bit, understand a little bit more, you know, how ThreatLocker helps banks and just organizations in general start adhering more to a zero trust framework. It's kind of a big buzzword. A lot of people are merging towards zero trust, and that might mean different things to different people. But for us, zero trust is making sure that only trusted software and applications are running in your environment. And anything that's untrusted just gets blocked by default. It's the whole mission of our organization is to help as many organizations as possible move from a default allow to a default deny mentality. And that's not new to us. That framework has been around for a long time. We're just happy to find a way that make that a little bit more actionable. So that is a purpose of our organization. We've worked with many banks, we've worked with many organizations across the United States and globally on this project, including our guest friends here from the Iowa Bankers Association. So we had the privilege of meeting last year, and as we worked together with them and identified that ThreatLocker would be a solution to help them achieve those zero trust frameworks that they were looking for. So we've got Josh on the call. I believe Tim's going to be joining as well. On the ThreatLocker side, we also have Eric Jensen. Eric is our solutions engineer. Done a lot of work with Eric. He's got great experience working with ThreatLocker. He's been also working with a lot of different financial institutions. And Eric will be guiding you guys through a little bit how ThreatLocker does the zero trust framework from a application whitelisting perspective, kind of showing you how we've worked with the IBA and other organizations. Goal here is to kind of give you guys a few takeaways of how zero trust could look like in your environment. If you guys already have some sort of whitelisting tool, that's phenomenal. You guys are already going in the right direction. Maybe you'll have a chance to see how we do a little bit differently. How you can reach some compliance goals if you guys are trying to have more visibility and control inside your environment. We're here to give you guys at least some ideas of what you could potentially add to your security stack inside your environment. So we'll have some giveaways at the end. We have some things that we want you guys to take home and remember us by. So without further ado, we'll let Eric kind of walk you guys through how we do that with ThreatLocker, and then we'll have the events team that's on the call here kind of walk through the giveaways at the end. Very excited, and I'll be here in the background. Eric, it's all you.
Thanks, Andre. Appreciate it. Hey, everybody. Eric Jansen here. It's like Andre said, one of the solutions engineers over here at ThreatLocker. So I'm going to do what I like to do here and kind of show off the product a little bit. And if we have any questions or whatever, I'm sure we will kind of pause afterwards and answer those for you and do some follow-up throughout. But yeah, let's jump right into it. I'm going to share my screen out here. I promise I won't bore you all with a PowerPoint today. We'll do a live demonstration. It'll be a lot more fun, I'm sure, for both of us. Okay, let's kind of get right into it, right? Andre does a really good job of kind of setting up ThreatLocker as a zero trust endpoint protection platform, which, yeah, okay, what does that really mean for us, right? I always start off most of my demonstrations kind of talking about the difference between reaction and proactive protection, right? Reactive protection is the stuff that we know about, right? The EDR tools, the XDR, MDR, the AV tools out there. We're kind of waiting for bad things to start happening. And then hopefully those tools recognize that and say, hey, let's stop this, right? And hopefully it's not too late. A proactive protection approach or a zero trust approach is really what ThreatLocker steps in. And we put controls in on certain areas of the environment, our application execution, our privilege of that execution, our storage access, our network access, these other things out there that say, hey, I don't even want it to get to a detection level. I want it to stop before it even initializes. And then we'll figure it out from there. So how do we do that? Because the problem is when we start talking about application execution or application allow listing, as it has historically been called, it's not a lot of fun to implement, right? And that was always historically something that people said, hey, I would love to do this, but we can't at scale very easily. That's where the paradigm shift comes in for ThreatLocker. What we do is kind of unique. We come into the environment, and this is, again, an endpoint-based, agent-based tool. And we deploy the agent of ThreatLocker to the environment, right? So we go out through your deployment tools, and we just have, your Mac, Windows, some of the Linux stuff out there sitting in what we call a learning state for a little bit of time. You'll notice my machines here, not a large organization by any means, but the scales up. We start off in a learning mode. Learning mode just passively sits there and says, okay, let's identify what's normal, what's expected to run in the environment, right? What's letting you all and your teams get the job done today that they need to get done. Let's gather that information up and make sure that that's allowed to run continuously going forward. And then we're going to go into the secured state. This is where we're in our default deny, if you will. Okay. Now, there's another issue with allowlisting, historically speaking. It's that when you have this list, as you can see in my inventory here, of applications that are now on this list, what do we do with this list in terms of managing it? How do we kind of make sure that this list stays up to date in terms of executions, right? So if I look at something like Adobe Acrobat or Windows updates or QuickBooks or whatever it may be, these are not static items, okay? What I mean by that is there's updates always coming through. Those new hashed files that are trying to run as part of that new update, they're going to get blocked on an allow list because this is only the application definition we knew at the time of learning. What's really unique about ThreatLocker is one of our largest teams here. It's called the applications team. We actively have a team that manages and monitors updates for these files, for these applications on our side. So when Adobe Acrobat pushes out a new update, we already know the files that make up that update, and we added it to our definition here. So you no longer have to manage that. Now, at some point, we're done with learning, right? We're secured. There's nothing else getting added to this list. What happens if somebody tries to run something that's not already on the list? Well, you would expect them to receive a block on it, right? And I prepared this little example today. I've got a couple of different ones I want to run through with you all. Let's say I ran something that we've all heard of, right? TeamViewer. We're not saying this is inherently good or bad, but you notice when I click on it, it says it's not on the list. Immediately a little pop-up from ThreatLocker came up here. Now, this can be customized, right? White labeled. We can have the organization logo here, custom text, button presses, really kind of change how this looks for your organization. If I hit request access, though, it should tell me a little bit about the app in this case. Now, I see right here it's remote management software. Great. It has X amount of access to the environment. I want everyone to pay attention to that because that becomes very important later on in this demo. I even see where this stuff comes from, right? I work with a lot of different organizations that have higher levels of compliance, perhaps, where they can't have things coming from certain countries these days. So we give you a heads up on that. And now the user, again, putting my user hat on here, might say, hey, we need this for a reason, right? We need this for IT purposes, perhaps. I'm part of the IT team, let's say. I shoot this off as a request. That is really the only interaction your end user should probably ever have with ThreatLocker. Every once in a while, when they need something completely new that's not on the allow list, they request it over to you. Now, this got sent to the administrative IT team at that point, right? And it can get sent in 3 different ways. Your ticketing tools out there, your email notifications. We have a mobile app, which is great. In my case here, I'm just going to jump into the response center, and I could see something came through called TeamViewer Setup. Now, if I asked you all how do we know that's TeamViewer setup? We couldn't really confirm anything right now, right? It's just the name of a file. Now, if I click in on this is going to be a pretty easy example to start with. Remember that database of applications that we just talked about, that built-in application inventory that our apps team manages. We are checking this file across that database and seeing if it matches something that we know about. In this case, it does. It's a legitimate file that's part of TeamViewer. I can click in on this TeamViewer example here and say, great, I want to make sure that all the files related to TeamViewer can run going forward. Now, remember, that database has all the other following hashes, right? The other hashes from older versions, from newer versions, they will be updated. So with one click, I can now approve TeamViewer to run. Now, who has to get this file, right? Or who has to have access to this policy? Is it for one computer? Is it for the entire organization? Is it a group of machines or a group of users, right? We, again, in that request saw that the IT computers team needs that. Let's give this to the IT team out there. We can even integrate where this policy goes to your Active Directory, both on-prem and cloud. Excellent. Now, here's where it gets kind of interesting, okay? a lot of people have the misconception that, okay, if I'm not a local admin or if I don't have local admin rights out there, I can't run new executions, right? And you're kind of hoping and praying that these files that you're running in the environment that your end users are running were written the way that Microsoft or whoever it is would like for them to be run, right? If it's a new execution, you have to have the privilege to run that. Not necessarily the case. So now with something like TeamViewer, I'm giving the system the ability to run this, but now it needs X amount of privilege to run. In this case, local admin rights. I don't want anyone out there to have local admins in the environment, pretty much at all going forward. What I want you all to use is ThreatLocker's elevation tool. This is pretty unique. So with something like TeamViewer setup for the IT team out there, we need to do an initial installation as a local admin. And again, nobody out there is local admin in my scenario here. So we're going to elevate this service, TeamViewer, to run either permanently or maybe not, maybe just for the next day or so as a local administrator. And it's per execution elevation that we're running here. So let's go ahead and approve this. I'll send out a little message perhaps telling the team they have 12 hours, whatever it may be. Shoot this off. And now we kind of sit back. And you'll notice on my end user side of things, I should receive a pop-up. There it is on screen saying it's been approved. Everybody gets their notifications. And now I can run out and install this software accordingly. Great. Now, what's pretty interesting about that elevation piece there is we're doing that kind of on the back end in a couple of different ways that are unique. So it's, again, we're not actually creating a ThreatLocker temporary admin account. We're not temporarily moving people into local admin groups out there. We're actually using effectively the system's privileges, which are, of course, administrative, under a user's instance of an application, execution by execution. So it's incredibly secure, incredibly tight where we're aligning these policies up. Now, another example of that elevation in action would be, okay, maybe it's not something where we're just preemptively elevating an app, right? We are now. Maybe what we're actually doing is, a user is running out to an app they already had access to, something like this. If I tried to open up Notepad++ in my environment, I can see that I have access to this. Let me try to run an example. I think this would be a good example for today. Maybe not. I might already have a policy here. We'll see. Nope, I did not. Perfect. We're going to hit a UAC prompt, right? Here we go. We're all familiar with the UAC prompt. I don't have these credentials as the end user anymore. And again, you didn't give them anything for this. You don't want your IT team remoting in to help out with this. What we're actually going to have here is the ability for the user to request ThreatLocker elevation directly through the UAC that's been modified. They could type their reasoning in, send this off as a request, and then right back inside of the approval center, if I do a quick little refresh, immediately I see Notepad++ coming through with an elevation request. So I had the execution ability of Notepad++ before. Now I'm tying in the privilege to that, though. Okay, pretty basic example so far. We added something to the allow list. Great. We elevated something. Great. You don't always want to add something to the allow list, right? If we're in secured mode and somebody runs out to some random website, clicks download, and they see, oh, something's ready to install, they click on it, it receives the block, just like you could see here on screen, this other execution sitting on my requests page. And we need to identify what this thing is. Let's do that. Let's click in on this business app 23. And I could look at some file details, of course. Maybe I want to dive in a little bit deeper. I see the full path. I see the process on how they tried to open this. I see the user, the reason provided. By the way, I think I need this is not a good reason. If you see users requesting things with that reason, this should give you pause. Where do I go from here? We give you some tools to investigate. The first thing I want to showcase is VirusTotal, a service that many of you all might be familiar with, right? Kind of cross-reference this file across all the other big detection players out there, right? What's Sophos, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike? What do they think about this? Yeah, maybe a lot of them don't detect anything, which is kind of interesting. Maybe a couple of them gave some red flags up top. These could be false positives. I'm not really sure what this thing is doing yet. So let's take it to the next level. Let's download this file. Let's kind of plug it into like a lab environment, a test environment, see what it does there, right? Great. That's always a great solution as well. We also give you this little button down here called the open testing environment. Now, open testing environment will actually open up a sandbox environment running on our side of things, right? So separate from your OS device resources, your network, and you can see how quick this is. Takes about 5 seconds or so, and there's that business app 23. I'm not doing anything to bring it into this. Business app 23 ready to install. Let's go ahead and run it, see what happens. Now you might have noticed I didn't get a UAC prompt there. That's kind of interesting. I don't really understand what's occurring on the environment, we give you different tools in this environment to kind of see if this is something you really want to play around with. You'll start getting notification alerts. Hey, we see something called test virus is now running in the background. That's not really great. We'll actually give you what's called the risk center as well in here, where you can actually poke and prod it in different ways. See what inbound, outbound traffic is happening on the device, what registry changes are trying to happen on the device, what virus total alerts are happening on the new device here inside this VDI. And we can kind of identify if this is something that's really needed for the business. In this case, probably not. We're going to go ahead and discard this, close this environment out, and then come right back into the flyout from earlier. Remember, the whole point of ThreatLocker is default deny, zero trust, right? I can click on reject of this item, give a little notification back to the end user saying, hey, we don't like what you requested here. It doesn't look good. We don't see the business use case for it. And it was never allowed to execute on the endpoints in any way, shape, or form. Really valuable to be able to do this in a quick and easy manner, right? Add something to the list or leave it off the list, let it continue to be blocked. And that's really all we've been talking about so far is a basic allow listing. Now, getting to building the allow list out and adding to it, that's what we've kind of identified as being a lot easier with ThreatLocker. Here's where it gets really interesting. What about something in between those two options? What about something you don't want to allow on the allow list, but something you also don't want to explicitly block? Maybe it's something that's kind of in the gray zone in between, right? We have a tool called ring fencing. This is a proprietary tool to ThreatLocker that lets us allow things to run, but with special parameters around it. So what I want to use as an example for today is something that many of you might be thinking about, something like PowerShell, right? Where it's, hey, we don't really want to kill off PowerShell. PowerShell is used for a lot of backend services, right? And if we start breaking it, then maybe those services aren't going to run well. But I want to limit what PowerShell could be used to do within my environment. So we're going to ring fence PowerShell. Now let's click in on this policy together, and I'll kind of read through this for you and explain what we're doing with ring fencing on this example. Here are those options we just talked about: permit, deny, permit with ring fence. The first thing I want to do is limit lateral movement within the application to other applications. A common one with PowerShell might be BitLocker, right? We see this happen a lot. Somebody gets a hold of PowerShell, they reach out to BitLocker, they do a change of the key, right? So we're locked down, encryption attempt starts, not a lot of fun. Okay, what else are we going to limit with PowerShell? How about restricting PowerShell's access to files? Why does PowerShell on the machines that it's on have access to the photos, documents, videos, network drives that user has access to? Is that something you use it for? Probably not. And then finally, how about restricting access to the internet for something like PowerShell? Why does PowerShell need unfettered access to the web? Any IP address, any domain that it wants to go out to, it can be leveraged to do so. Why don't we tighten that up? Why don't we keep that to Microsoft IPs, Microsoft domains, private IP ranges out there? These things that really are, only used on the machines. We don't need to go anywhere else with it. Now, if I add those parameters up, I've prepared an interesting little example for you all today. That's going to be a data exfiltration example. Okay. Now I'm going to open this up and I want you to imagine this really basic command you're seeing here running in a few different ways. Somebody has remote access to a machine. Somebody has physical access to a machine. What about somebody picking up something like a rubber ducky or one of these OMG cables, these kind of keystroke injection tools you might hear about out there. Somebody plugs in a device, right? It immediately runs out, does some keystrokes on the machine. Something like this occurs. Let's read through this together, and I'll show you how simple a data exfil attempt could kind of be done on a lot of machines out there. We're going to ask this command to run out to PowerShell. We're going to run this whole command as a hidden command, so we couldn't read through it like this, right? It's going to disappear instantly. And this is where this command starts getting a little interesting. I have a Google API plugged in here, Google storage account. I don't have to authenticate to upload anything to this location. And what I'm going to do is look for anybody's documents named path, which I bet everybody on this call still has a documents named path. We're going to grab the information in that location and upload it. So let's run this, see what happens. Okay, it disappeared, right? It's a hidden command. It's doing its job. Now, what's kind of interesting to me is that you don't have a bunch of notifications popping up. At least I don't hear. I've done this test on a lot of the different AV tools out there. They never populate any sort of alerts. Why is that? What we just did was completely fileless. Okay, there's no malware running in the environment. There's no new hashed file trying to run in the environment. I'm just leveraging tools that are already on your machine, such as PowerShell, and the access that they inherently have against you. Now, if I run out to my blocked items list, and open this up on this machine. This might be a little small on screen for everyone, but that's okay. We'll read through it together. In about 1 second on the timestamp over here, I can see everything in my documents path. These little, fake documents I threw in there, of course, were being grabbed with PowerShell and trying to write out to the web. We can prove that in a second here. And every one of those actions was ring fenced or denied, but that similar ring fencing terminology I was just talking about. And that's thanks to that PowerShell policy. Okay. Everyone, this is a living off the land attack vector, right? This is fileless malware. This is what 0 days leverage, right? The 0 day is somebody finds a hole in the code. They know that that application that they're leveraging has X amount of access and they're using that application against you. You now have the tools to go in and kind of limit that access by default. Imagine the power of kind of locking down deprecated software. Maybe there's a piece of software out there we're using for financing or whatever it may be, and it's old. We haven't been able to update it. There's a process behind that it's going to take a long time for us to kind of update and modernize that solution. We now have these controls to go in and granularly lock down that application to only allow it to have access to the things it needs. Ring fencing is very key to the overall application control and security of an environment. Excellent. All right. We're going to pivot a little bit over to some of the other control modules. I'm going to be a lot more brief on these. I always say the application control is kind of the bread and butter, right? That's what really started things. But zero trust architecture is really important to be implemented across other areas too. I mentioned up front the network, the storage. These are things we need to be aware of when we're trying to implement new security products. Let's jump into network control really quick, because this is a very, very interesting one. Network control is just a host-based firewall. Okay. Everybody out there has their network firewall, right? We get that. And that's really protecting that north-south traffic in and out of an environment. Hey, what leaves, what comes in? Okay. Once that is breached, which happens more often than you might think, what is the next bastion of protection? What's protecting the east-west traffic within an environment? Well, it should be a host-based firewall or an endpoint-based firewall. And yeah, you've got Windows firewall out there. You've got like the Mac OS firewall out there. I want a layer of protection above that because, first of all, the management of those solutions, not that easy. And then second of all, there's a huge security flaw or security downside to those, I should say. Okay, we have network control within ThreatLocker. Let's do a very basic example together here. I want to allow a certain inbound process to my servers. Let's call it remote desktop. And I like using remote desktop because you would be very surprised at how often that port is leveraged in attack vectors once somebody gets inside the network, right? So I called it RDP, remote desktop protocol. And let's click on this policy together. Okay, I want to go into my servers. So I'm going to create an inbound rule to my servers, right? And this is where it gets a little unique. Instead of using an IP address or an IP kind of range for your source, I want everyone to start using objects. Objects are things that ThreatLocker sees. Objects are things such as the entire organization of ThreatLocker devices, maybe the group of ThreatLocker machines, such as the IT group we talked about earlier. What about a unique machine, right? I could say Eric's machine or Andre's machine. Let's grab one of those. Now, what's cool about the object is I don't really care what's happening with that machine. It's an agent-based check saying that this machine is this machine. It's trying to come in through that rule, right? So you don't have to manage it as much. Now, if I come down the rule set here, I see 3389 is the port range I'm kind of putting in there. That's my RDP port. I have now created a rule. It took us 30 seconds to make something like that, right? Okay, ease of configuration, big win there. What's the security benefit? Well, if we went out to your servers right now, and let's say we're doing this on Windows Firewall, and I created a 3389 allowance inbound, right, for remote desktop. If I'm in that subnet, which again, let's say I'm a bad guy, I've gotten through the network firewall, I'm in the subnet effectively with these machines, I can use a port scanner, a port sniffer. I can see the ports that are open out there and start my brute force attack, right? That initial access piece is really, really concerning. I want to lock that down. What we use here with everything inside of network control is dynamic ACLs or dynamic port management. Now, what that means is that those ports are effectively being closed off and they're only dynamically opening when someone on a listed rule here, those objects we talked about earlier, is knocking on the port door, right? It says, hey, look, it's Eric's machine, it's Andre's machine. They're on the list. Let them in to do that RDP connection over 3389. And then when you leave that connection, the port gets closed back off. pen testers, bad guys, they're not going to like this a lot because they're basically going to have no visibility into the environment anymore on the network side of things. So again, implementing zero trust controls on the network, very important. Now, before I jump into this next control module here, I think it's important to kind of identify where does all the visibility of these things go, right? Like, how do I set this stuff up? How do I see what ports I should be monitoring? Well, where's that visibility? And so I want to jump into this tool called the Unified Audit for a second. And this unified audit is really your best friend. This is an investigative tool, as I like to put it, where I can go back in time. I can look at a specific machine. I can look at a specific user and really find out any sort of information I want about that search. So let's go here. Let's just look at today. And I drop into action types. Let's look at executions, perhaps, right? Oh, okay, cool. I see everything running on the machine. Here, I see that TeamViewer setup that we ran into a block on earlier being denoted. Here's where I see Notepad opening. We did open Notepad earlier. You'll see things running in the background as well. Kind of neat to see all this. How about the network side of things? We just talked about network. I now have visibility inbound, outbound to every connection happening in the environment. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of outbound stuff, not nearly as much inbound, but we're going to protect those inbound connections. But I can even get data on the outbound. I could say, wow, what was going on here? There was an events.data.microsoft.com domain being reached out to of report 443. We parsed out this domain from that IP. Pretty cool. And if I see this was permitted outbound, let's click in on it and see what was even doing this. Okay, it's a technology site. Great. But look at that. The process that was even doing this is Microsoft Edge. Can now build out and see what tools are using these ports and reaching out to these sites. Very valuable information. Now, I went to this unified audit because I kind of want to segue into our next control module here, which is storage control, right? And the first thing I always like to identify and talk about with storage control is storage visibility or storage auditing. Okay. It's really valuable, especially in industries like your all's, to have visibility on what's happening with the file sets out there, the reads, the writes, the moves, the deletes. Where are these things going? Who's touching these things? What processes are touching these things? So let's jump into write actions, right? We just did this a second ago where I tried to write out files using PowerShell. Wow, okay, here they are from a remote perspective. I'm not looking on the individual machine anymore. I can see all these denied actions of writing out files. And I can click in on any one of these and look at details as to why this was able to happen. I see Bob on this machine at this time was writing out some background photo. Okay, and it says that PowerShell was the process that was being used to do this. Why would Bob be doing that? How did Bob start using PowerShell to do this? Let's dive even deeper. I can click in on the more details section here and scroll down a little bit. And you can see right here, a full path with command line. There's that entire command we read through earlier together, kind of showing how this kicked off. This is called the process tree, right? How do these things initialize? That's incredibly important to have. Again, if anybody's deleting things, if somebody's moving things, reading things, we see all this and how they're happening. Great. Visibility on storage is one thing, but now I want to lock these things down in different ways. How do I go about doing this? Let's jump into the storage control module. And I want to show you a very basic example up front. This is something you probably already have a couple tools in your tool set that you can use. But the problem is they're not easy to implement, right? And what I'm kind of referring to is let's talk about blocking interfaces such as USB drives, DVD, CD, stuff like this. Something fairly simple, but again, for compliance needs, this is something you have to adhere to. And we'll get into compliance a little bit more as we talk about this. Okay, I came up with a policy right here called deny all USB. Let's go in here. Let's jump in and see how I'm applying this policy. I'm doing it for all workstations. I am doing it for all users right now. I could tighten this up, right? I could do this for specific groups of users, individual users. And I'm selecting an interface for this one. Now, this is nice, right? We get full access to control USB drives, DVD, CD, network drives, SD cards. Doesn't really matter. So I'm blocking these by default, but look where it starts to get a little unique here at the bottom. I'm allowing the user to request. So allow with exceptions, right? Let's come in and do an example of that. If I go into my file explorer, let's click on USB drive D here. Immediately that same pop-up that we saw earlier with the application request came into play. And it says you got to request access for this. There's a storage policy blocking you. Great. I come in, I say, hey, guys, there's a marketing event happening. I really need access to this drive. Please let me grab my PowerPoints, whatever it may be. I shoot this off as a request. And again, the end user is done. That's the only experience they really have with this product, which is great. This got sent over to the administrative side, the IT side. Back in the response center, instantly, a request just came through for that drive. Here it is. It's a read action, this user, this machine. There's the drive, and you'll notice that the serial number is already denoted in this request. So when I click in on this, look at how granular we can make a policy per drive or per machine or per user. I could say, you know what, this is a shared computer. This computer and any user on this computer can use this specific drive. Maybe I kind of flip that around. Maybe I say, you know what, this is Andre's computer. Andre, you can use your USB drive on your computer, but that's it. Very tight there. Or maybe Andre is the director of IT and he's bouncing around, plugging his drive everywhere, right? We'll say this drive can be used by Andre anywhere in the organization. But if Jimmy sitting next to Andre picks it up, Jimmy has zero access. Okay, read, write permissions are now granted. I can create like a custom name for the drive called Andre's USB, whatever we want to call it. Let's get back into compliance a little bit. You're going to need to make sure that these things are encrypted for various compliance frameworks. We're going to do an encryption check on that. We're going to verify that this thing is allowed to run as long as it has an encryption check being verified. And then the big one for compliance, you have an auditor walk in, they say, hey, show me your USB drives. Are these things 24/7 accessible? You're going to fail that portion of the audit. Why put an Outlook reminder on your calendar to go back on your GPO to remind yourselves to delete the policy for a USB drive? I think that's absolutely insane in 2025 that we're still doing stuff like this. What I want is for you all to use our expiration slider here, drop it down to 24 hours of access, a week of access, 8 hours of access, and now give those users access for only the time period they need it. Excellent. So that's one area we can manage with storage control. I've got an interesting example for you, and I thought this might be a fun one to kind of prep for today. I'll be quick with this one. If I go back in my storage control policies, there's maybe a big like public share, financial document share, network share out there, right? And these are things that usually have really sensitive data in them. And I want to make sure these are also highly protected. Okay, let's go into my QuickBooks share, right? Talking to banking out there. I'm thinking something financial. Let's use this for a fun example. Let's jump into my file explorer and I see a QuickBooks share right here. I'm going to click in on it. Let's try to access that thing. Oh, there's a problem accessing this location. Well, that's kind of odd because if I come back into the policies, I see there's a permit policy for read and writes on a QuickBooks share. Maybe I misconfigured something, right? That's kind of the first thing I would think is maybe, I, Eric, don't have access to this location. Maybe I misconfigured it. I didn't give read permissions. What's going on here? No, that's not the case. As we kind of read through this, I see all workstations and all users have access. I gave read and write permissions. And if I scroll down, for sake of demo, that is the correct path. So everything seems accessible right now. Why couldn't I click in on that path? Check this out. A couple more scrolls down here. I can actually start specifying the programs that have access to the above conditions. So not only do I have to be on the right machine, do I not only have to be the right user and be granted a policy within ThreatLocker, I now also have to be using the proper software to access these kind of secure files, my QuickBooks files, my backup share files. Really important to be able to lock this down at an even more granular level like this. I always like doing a little example like that. I think it's kind of fun. Awesome. Okay. I'm not going to dive into too much else here. I want to make sure I have time for everybody to kind of ask questions and then Andre to kind of go through his spiel too. But one thing I do want to mention is you'll notice the modularity of this platform, right? These are all considered modules, everything we're running down through today. You're going to notice a lot of these modules have control attached to them. Whenever you see something that says it's a control module, that's the zero trust. That's the deny by default, sort of lock things down and then allow by exception. These are the proactive protection pieces. Like I said up front, proactive and reactive protection. What's the big difference there? We do have another one out there called web control, which is pretty important as well. It's an endpoint-based web content filtering tool. Really valuable. You can kind of come in there, put some policies in place, blocking access to certain kind of categories of websites, right? And then you can create your own blocks as well. And again, same theme as the rest of the control modules, if you run into a block on a site, well, it pops up saying that you have to request access if you want it to. Nice thing about that is having that on the endpoint as opposed to the firewall. We don't really care what's happening with the device, right? Wherever that device is, if it's a work machine, it's being protected with that content filter. Great. And that's really the last of the control modules. You'll notice we do have a couple modules here called detection, right? ThreatLocker Detect, and then M365. These are speaking to more of the EDR and then cloud detection side of things, right? So we have our own EDR platform. You can stack these controls up with what you currently have on the detection side, or you can kind of say, hey, we have a lot of portal fatigue out there. We have a lot of agent fatigue out there. We have 40 different things kind of taking up a little bit of processing power across the environment. We want to consolidate. We want to come into one product, ThreatLocker in this case, and have detection, have the controls, have the content filtering, and we offer that as well. And finally, we have a patch management solution as well. That's third-party patching of various applications out there. I would love to give that a look with you all, but I'm going to pass it back to Andre for now and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate it. And hopefully you guys got a comprehensive view of how ThreatLocker can help with controls. But I want to bring in Josh and Tim. Josh and Tim have honestly, they became great friends. They're just great people to work with. And like I said, last year we had a chance to connect and do this project together. But Tim, from your perspective, what is the importance of having controls from an application whitelisting perspective, moving away from just solely EDRs? How's your experience been? If you want to share with the people that are watching the webinar.
Yeah, well, yeah. So as Andre mentioned, we started. We've had the product now since about January. We were a Carbon Black customer previously, so I mean, 100% we have always been on board with the idea of application whitelisting. You know, we Carbon Black was a good product. We had a good run with it. I will say our transition over to ThreatLocker has been fantastic. I think it is a much better product, especially with a number of the changes that's been happening over time. But the concept behind it is still the same. The importance of blocking files, starting with the concept of a block all and then allow what you need to, just completely turns everything, it just turns everything upside down versus trying to do a whack-a-mole of blocking everything you don't want to have run. It's just, it does take a little bit of work. I know for some people on who maybe have either talked about Carbon Black in the past or other products, it still takes a little bit of work to fine tune those. But the application itself has just been fantastic to be able to do that easily. And I'd be remiss to not point out, I mean, Andre and Brad and the other individuals we've worked with, Eric and everyone has just been absolutely fantastic. Their onboarding, the onboarding has been absolutely amazing. We've been on the platform for a number of months. We still do regular calls to go through the portal, make sure everything's up to date. So I'm not making anything. I don't get a referral bonus, although if you do /Tim, you do get 10% off, and I get 10%. But
Throw your
no,
Zell in there.
yeah. But quite seriously, I think the transition between the two products is, we still get the same concept, but a much better implementation. And Eric mentioned, not just the application controls, but the network control policies and the ring fencing has just been really powerful. I mean, just being able to lock down PowerShell without removing it, and it gives us so much more flexibility, so much more control. And again, I mean, the overall team, I went down to the conference this year in February, March, whenever that was, and getting to talk to the other customers. I mean, the passion behind the product is fun to have that group of people, and then the staff is just, again, Eric's enthusiasm as he's demoed the product is kind of what everybody's has of their staff have toward the product. So it's just nice to have that group of people to work with to get this implemented. That was a very long answer to your short question, so my apologies. But I really do, and that's why we wanted to be on this webinar with you. Is for the banks that are on, and they're going to be here at the conference as well. And I think this is just a great technology, a great platform. We absolutely love it. We think it's absolutely pivotal um, to our security, and I mean that's it's important to us. So sorry, my long speech there.
No, Tim, that was fantastic. Appreciate your transparency. It's one thing for us to do a, a demo of the product, but I think for the folks on the call, hearing from someone who's been using it, for the better part of 7, 8 months, it's a whole different perspective. And you're right, we will be at the technology conference at the end of October, so looking forward to connecting with you guys there. And then, Josh, want to bring you in as well. Anything to add, or do you have a different perspective from what Tim shared?
No, I'd echo the same as Tim. The transition from Carbon Black to ThreatLocker has been fantastic. The onboarding is great. Saved me a lot of time. The built-in apps are huge. You get those Adobe updates with the unsigned files, and Carbon Black, you'd be getting all kinds of alerts. With ThreatLocker, those are updated. So you don't have to worry about those. Save a lot of time. So yeah, I'd echo Tim and say it's been really great.
Fantastic. Thanks, Josh. And and something to keep in mind, there is an option where if, let's suppose you guys, if a client were to move towards ThreatLocker, approving applications sometimes is one of the things that takes more time. Although the more you do it, the more you kind of get the hang of it. But Tim was right. I mean, it's not a set it and forget it tool. There is an expectation from the IT team that this is going to take, you're going to have to set time aside to make sure that ThreatLocker is doing what you want it to do. We help with that as we have an option to offload some of those to ThreatLocker. So what we're trying to do is make ThreatLocker as manageable as possible in the event that someone wants to take a swing at application whitelisting. We do have, I know, at least one question in the queue, and if there are any other questions that you guys want to ask, feel free to throw that in there. But I'll read off the first one here, and then Eric, I'll let you answer it. But someone asked if ring fencing PowerShell, can I exclude the IT staff workstation from this?
Yeah, and I gave the short answer, which is just yes, absolutely you can in there. But to get a little more granular with that, yeah, of course. So you can break out devices into device groups. You could manage them through maybe an Active Directory list that you're already using for those users, and then basically say, hey, we want to lock down ring fence PowerShell in certain ways for the vast majority of users, but obviously an IT staff or some other staff members out there, they might need some exclusions to that, right? So we're going to manage them with their own policy on that, and that's something that your solutions engineer is going to help kind of guide you through along the way. So for sure.
Excellent. Well, I'll give a minute. If anyone else has any extra questions, please throw them in the queue. And while you guys are doing that, let me go ahead and just say that it's been a pleasure, working with everyone. We do have a conference in Orlando. I don't know what the weather is typically like in end of February, March in Iowa. I'm sure you guys have snowboarding down the massive slopes you guys have over there. But in the event you guys want to run away from the cold weather and come see the mouse and check out ThreatLocker, there's a phenomenal event that we put together, and it's going to be bigger than this year's, Tim. They had to get a new hotel. The one that we did this year is just, it's not big enough, but it's meant to be a cybersecurity learning event. So we try to keep it as much as possible, not drinking from the Kool-Aid, but just the idea of moving away from, well, not moving away, but increasing security by not just having a detection tool. The whole concept behind, only allowing what you need and blocking everything else by default. And we build a conference around that framework. But we can send out more information. We'll follow up with email if that's something that you guys would like to attend. Like I said, I think this year is going to be the first week of March, but we'll get the details. It's in Orlando, Florida. Any other questions come in here? Let me just make sure. Henry and the team, I don't think we have anything else come in. So once again, thank you everyone for showing up. We're going to be sending you a gift in the mail. We have an events team. Anyone from the events team want to hop on here? Is there a logistic behind it? If not, from what I understood, we have a list of the people that showed up, and we'll send a ThreatLocker reminder, or just a gift of appreciation for showing up. I think we're good. Awesome. So thank you once again, everyone. Eric, Tim, Josh, ThreatLocker events team, thanks for helping putting this together. And if you guys want to learn more about what we do, we can do tailored demos in your environment, just trying to understand, as much as possible what you guys are currently doing. We'll kind of do something similar to this, but more specific to your bank. And yeah, happy to work together more, show you more if that's something that is a use case in your current environment. But if not, then thank you. We'll let you guys get back to your day. Have a great weekend, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.